Because of this foundation, every step I take reminds me of her, and can't help it but get emotional. Ariana was a beautiful and bright young lady. She was determined to become a successful businesswoman. She had a very generous heart in forgiving others. She was passionate about her studying at San Francisco State University, and she wanted to earn her degree. She was also very diligent with her work. As a matter of fact, I heard from her coworkers and managers that she had a superb customer service talent, and many of her customers followed her to the new bank when she started at First Republic. She also was very much in love with cars. She enjoyed nice cars. All in all, Ariana was a sweetheart, and I miss her dearly. What I cherished the most about Ariana was our study time when we did this together. Because of my background in business, Ariana used to come and do a study time with me when she was getting prepared for midterms or final exams. She would bring me her complex and modestly difficult business assignments, and she wanted to check with me to make sure that her work is accurate, her work is good. And each time I had these sessions with her, I just enjoyed it immensely. And as a dad, that I was always looking over her shoulder, I always check to make sure that she understands the business aspect and the deep knowledge of it. And she always impressed me in that young age, understanding business concepts so beautifully. So I'm very, very proud of Ariana and her accomplishments. My life has changed forever. Ariana left a massive void in my heart and in my life, as well as the rest of the family members. I take Ariana's love to my grave. The life is not the same, will not be the same without my beloved Ariana. When we decided to establish this foundation for our daughter Ariana, I wanted to describe our mission in one single sentence and came up with the following: that we're turning a heart-shattering tragedy into a lifetime mission to help victims of violence. What I meant by this statement was that for the rest of my life and my wife's, this foundation will be our mission to help others that are in difficult situations, that are victims. We realized shortly after that our work will continue after my life and others. And one of our board members, Mrs. Schneider, suggested to revise my statement as follows: turning a life-shattering tragedy into hope for victims of violence. We therefore have a long-term plan for this foundation, and God willing, will grow and intend to have a substantial impact in our community.
I work at First Republic Bank. I'm a regional manager, and I hired Ariana last summer to come and work for us as a personal banker. We call them preferred bankers, and I met her in the summertime, and she made a great first impression. She was incredibly organised with her work. She loved people more than anything, and she took her work really, really seriously. Like, for someone who looked really young, she had really quite a mature head on her when it came to work. She took it really seriously, and I saw many great traits that would have led to a really great career, because she had that certain way with people where people just gravitated towards her and really liked her. It was gregarious, fun. She always smiled. If someone came to her with a problem in the bank, she would be really attentive. She was a great listener, which is someone who is so young. It was a skill set that was unusual. Like, you don't normally see, 23-year-olds in their young 20s really paying attention to what people say when they've got an issue, whether it's something personal or whether it was something to do with their finances. She was a really good listener, and that was really unusual. I hadn't hired very many people that young who have that skill set. But in terms of just adjectives, I mean, likable. Like, she was the light up a whole office. She changed the energy in an office because she was so positive, and she was just determined. She was never late for work. She was always on time. She took her work really seriously. She wanted to be a branch manager so bad. She'd asked me what she needed to do to become a branch manager. And I told her a story of another colleague who runs one of the offices in the peninsula that was a manager when she was like 24 for First Republic. And she wanted to know all about how my colleague got there. And I remember telling her what she did, and Ariana was really focused on wanting to get to that stage in her life where she was coaching people and helping people and being a leader. So I think a leader would be another adjective that I would describe in her. Yeah. So one of the things that, like, obviously, like, losing Ariana all of a sudden was a shock to everybody, but she had a way of making people smile, and I came in to work on the Monday afterwards, after she'd passed, and I had the job of emptying her desk, and it really, I wasn't looking forward to it at all. And I remember opening up her desk, and my boss was with me, and I opened up the desk and I saw it was so neat. She had all her files in perfect order. They were written out. I mean, it was like really neat, and she had her last way of making me smile. When I looked inside her desk, it was just everything that I thought I knew about her when I opened her desk was confirmed. She took her work really seriously, and I was really proud of her at that moment in time. And I remember just feeling a warm sense of being a bit closer to her when I saw that. So I shared that with her family afterwards, and it was just something that meant a lot to me.
So I met Ariana through First Republic Bank. I was her mentor at work. I was responsible for training her and showing her the hoops through and around a certain part of our job, the culture. And I met her since she started with the bank, and for, I think, 6 months maybe, yeah. Ariana, gosh, I would say she's just a beautiful person, a beautiful soul. She just has such a great heart. Every time we talked, she was just so happy. She's just full of life and so bubbly. She was amazing. She's a firecracker. She's just so happy, so joyful, so energetic, vivacious. Her work ethic, she's always eager to learn, take the next step. She's so genuine. She's thoughtful. Always ready for the next steps. We talked a lot about work, and we talked about what we did over the weekend and kind of what's going on. And she would often share, a lot of her time included time spent for school. Her dad helping her on her homework, and she would share a lot of stories, just talked a lot about the family, her sister and her brother and her mom. She just really wanted to help her sister get a job, and her concern was like, could families work together, you know? So just her thoughtfulness and her concern for always wanting to help her family member, her sister, and she touched my soul. Just very sad. I just wish I wish I had talked to her more personally. And yeah, I just wish I had more time with her. Well, I know that just talking to Ariana, she had big dreams, her next steps in life, and she's just ready to tackle the next best thing. Just ready to graduate. Her spirit is gonna live on through this foundation. That's what I believe. And this foundation will help. I think it will be good to just bring awareness to families and other people that are victims of domestic violence, and educate people of red flags that we need to look out for. I think even touching one person would be a lot.
Okay.
Ariana.
By another driver.
We respond to calls for domestic violence as a patrol officer. You know that you're going to a situation that you've either been called to by a reporting party, a victim, a suspect, a neighbor. Somebody's calling you because they want your help in that moment, because tensions are high, because there is an argument going on, because there is something, whether it be physical yet or just verbal at this point. Emotions are high, and with that comes the chance for violent confrontation. It's a very frequent call. It's one of the most frequent calls we get. Not always is it physical domestic violence, where somebody's actually being assaulted.
Right.
A lot of it's verbal, and a neighbor will call, or someone in the household will call to have the police there before it escalates anymore. And we actually prefer that because we can stop something before it happens. Unfortunately, not all domestic violence incidents are reported. A lot go unreported. I think a lot has to do with fear. Fear of reporting on someone that you're in a relationship with. What are the consequences for you doing that? You know, this person goes to jail. Do they make the money in the family? Are you going to be able to survive without their income because you put them in jail? What are the long-term outcome? Are they going to be upset with you when they get out of jail and continue the violence? Is it going to make things worse? We found that domestic violence victims are more likely to be willing to seek help immediately following the incident versus days or weeks later. So our patrol officers, every domestic violence call that they go to, they offer CORA, which is a program here in San Mateo County that deals with domestic violence victims, providing them resources. And so at the scene, CORA is offered to speak to a counselor right then and there. And like I said, we find that more victims are willing to speak with CORA at the time of the incident. It's not the first time. Normally when we get called, it's not an isolated first-time incident. When we ask probing questions and deeper questions, it's this is the time that they finally were fed up and decided to report. And the abuse, whether it be physical, emotional, financial, psychological, all these different forms of domestic violence abuse have been going on prior to the police ever being involved. So we're actually kind of behind the 8 ball when we get there, and now it's playing catch up. I think the biggest key is being aware that you are in a domestic violence or an abusive relationship. Too many times women, men, whoever's being abused,
Right.
they don't realize that they're in the abusive relationship because they're not made aware. They don't realize that children being used against them, or the fact that someone's the breadwinner and holds all the money, or somebody is mean to them but never hits them, that's still domestic violence. And I think the biggest thing is being aware that you're in an abusive relationship and not being afraid to reach out for help. There are plenty of organizations out there, including Cora, and the Ariana May Foundation is a great resource for domestic violence victims.
So as a patrol officer, when we are dispatched to a domestic violence incident, it is considered a high priority call, meaning we send multiple officers to that call. In the city of Daly City, we also send our supervisor, our field supervisor, to those calls. And domestic violence calls are the most dangerous calls that we respond to as police officers. I believe in nationwide, there was a study done, and out of police line of duty deaths, 22% of them were police officers responding to domestic violence related calls. So domestic violence calls, it's an emotional incident.
Right.
You have two people, whether it's two partners, sometimes there's children involved, but specifically in domestic violence related calls, most of the time the suspect and the victim, or the abuser and the victim, live together in that home.
Right.
So the difference between a domestic violence call and it's a robbery call, the suspect flees the scene. In
Right.
most cases, the suspect stays on scene on a domestic violence call. Domestic violence is very common. Within the last 4 years, annually, I believe we've, as an agency, we've taken about 700 to 800 domestic violence cases, related cases. About a third of them were physical, and then the other 2/3 were verbal. Daly City, we're one of the few agencies in our county that documents the verbal domestic incidents. One thing I would encourage is to reach out to family and friends. In my career here as a police officer, I've noticed that most victims, they tend to hold in the abuse that they've gone through, the cycle, and I believe they just need someone to reach out to. And there's counselors that they could go to. There's victim assistance programs. The cycle of violence, it's a cycle that never ends, unless you make an effort to, unless you're proactive in your efforts to end it. And there are several resources. There is Cora. There's also the Ariana May Foundation. That's very helpful.
Officers always respond in at minimum pairs, depending on what the dispatcher gets. But at minimum, there would be a pair of officers responding, and they go to a scene, separate the parties, depending on, the seriousness of it. They could call for help or additional units. But typically, if it's just kind of a verbal incident, they would separate the parties. They would find out separately from each party what's going on, what happened. Was there any abuse? Is it just verbal? Was it physical? Is there something going on in the past? Are you being held? I would say the word hostage, but really what I mean is sometimes people get trapped in a situation they feel they can't get out of. So we try to sort of fish those questions out, like, are you afraid to leave? Do you have the ability to leave? Do you have family? Do you have any other resource that you would be able to get out of the situation if you needed to? So we kind of ask those questions. And during the process, we also offer them counseling and other resources to help them if they need. So we have resources that help them get restraining orders if they need to. We have resources at the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office that we can get them help. And we have CORA, which is actually for Daly City, it's a mandated part of the process. And what we do is at some point during this interview, we will call CORA with or without the permission of the victim or the suspect. And they will call us back, usually within 10 minutes they call us back, and we will give them the basic information, the name and the case number of the folks that are involved in the case number relating to Daly City. And we offer the victim and the suspect an opportunity right then to talk with CORA and speak with a counselor immediately, whether it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, it doesn't matter. Often, sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't, but either way, what CORA does is opens a case on their end, and they will document what we have, and they'll follow up at some point with the victim. So essentially, that's how the whole case will go. So we'll make sure that if an arrest needs to be made, we'll make an arrest. We'll take the offending party out, or the primary aggressor, whatever the investigation reveals, and at that point, we'll leave the scene. That's, I think, from beginning to end, that's pretty much a domestic violence call that would be, unless it was super serious, like if there were injuries or that type of thing, it would get a weapon. Often it ends in arrest. In fact, in San Mateo County, or in the state of California, we have what's called a mandatory arrest. It's part of the law. So if we go to a domestic violence incident, and domestic violence, meaning you're married, you have children together, live together, that type of thing, and there's an injury, a visible injury, we are mandated by law to make an arrest. So there's no option. It can't be, oh, you guys are going to get along, just be fine, go back in your rooms, you go in this room, you go in that room, don't drink anymore, or whatever it may be. There's none of that. It's somebody's going to jail if there's a visible injury of any kind, even a minor scratch.
How often is it just a one-time incident?
Very often it's not a one-time thing. So there are one-time. So what could happen, it's not always the victim that's calling us. In fact, it's quite the opposite usually. It's a bystander or a neighbor, apartment above or below, or a kid, or a third party that's a friend that knows they're arguing is calling. So more often than not, that's how we get calls to domestic violence. It's not the victim that's calling us. So taking that into context, you could just be having a normal verbal argument that's just loud, that we all have with our significant other. You're arguing over, what flavor the icing is going to be on your kid's birthday cake, and we get called. So that could be a one-time incident. Very, very often a cycle, and it happens over and over, and what these victims find themselves in is this domestic violence cycle, it's actually called. And so it could be verbal abuse, it could be mental abuse, it could be financial abuse, it could be a lot of things. But what is often the cycle is, let's say it's physical abuse. We'll come that day, we will make an arrest if there's physical abuse. We'll come back, and often the victim will then feel sorry for the offender, or the spouse, or the boyfriend, or the girlfriend, and then it sort of reverses. And then the offender typically will come back, and it's called the honeymoon phase, where they'll come back, they bring flowers, they bring candy, they bring you to dinner, I love you, I'm so sorry, it will never happen again. And that's so very, very often happen. It's so typical that happens. So in that sense, domestic violence, it's a cycle, and it will keep on going, and we do see it often. And when I was a patrol officer, I would go to the same house 5, 10, 15 times for the same exact scenario. And it is truly heartbreaking sometimes. And you see these people, the victims, that have no idea how to get out of these situations. And often, worse than having no idea might be having no resources to get out of it. They know they're in a horrible situation, they want to get out, but they may be, they don't have the money. Like if it's the other person has all the money, they might be an immigrant, or just have no family in general in the area or at all, and they have nowhere to go. So if they left, they'd be on the streets. So I don't know that there's ever been a point in time where there wasn't domestic violence. I would say that, as with anything else, it's been exposed, and social media, the newspapers, advocacy groups, a lot more people are getting involved and they're exposing these things. And as a police department, 30 or 40 years ago, you might have gone to a house and a domestic violence incident would have been, hey, it's family, let them figure it out. And now it's just not the case, right? We are mandated to do certain things in order to break, and really the intention is to break that cycle of domestic violence that we talked about earlier. So hopefully an arrest triggers something in that house that might change it. It might change the offender, says, I don't want to go to jail again.
Right.
It might change the victim who says, I'm not going to be in this relationship to the point where it's got to this now. So there's a lot of things that could happen, but we're mandated to step in and do these things that hopefully break that cycle or prevent the cycle from happening if this were the first or second incident. Why? There's dependency issues that come up. There's people are grown up in a certain way. People are raised a certain way. People could have been raised in a house where there was a violent mother or father. There's just so many issues and so many reasons why people stay in a house like that. I don't honestly know what they could be or why they do it, but they do, and it's real. And that's why we have, for example, Cora. Cora provides counseling. They provide resources. If somebody doesn't have the resources to leave, they help them with that. They can provide, in certain circumstances, a place for them to stay, sleep, money for food, for travel to and from work. They have an attorney that works for them, and then they have other attorneys that do pro bono work that help certain people in certain situations. So they do provide a lot of resources in that sense for people who can't get out. And then for the people who can get out, they provide counseling, and they try to help them along in that way if that's what they need. At least it's sort of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It's kind of that scenario, right? That Cora is there to help you, but they can't change you, and they can't make you change. All they can do is give the opportunity or present it and provide the door for you to walk through. This might be a good point to bring up the Ariana May Foundation. It's just starting, and it's going to be another resource in San Mateo County to help victims of domestic violence. So there's a lot of ideas on the table right now, but the bottom line is we're going to raise money, or this group is going to raise money to help prevent domestic violence and to help people that find themselves in domestic violence situations and possibly get them out of it. So it's just another resource in San Mateo County that hopefully police officers can use. And the Ariana May Foundation I think the cause is great. I think Julian, Farzine, Hatami are amazing people, and they've been through a horribly tragic event, and they're using this to not only help themselves get through a horrible incident, but they're trying to make something good in this world because of it, and they want Ariana's legacy to carry on, and this is one way that they can do it. And I think it's just a great idea. It's noble, and it's real. And it wasn't even a thought. So the question was, what made me want to be a part of it? And I'll just be honest, I never thought about being a part of it. It was never, he asked me, and it wasn't even a question of do I want to or do I not want to. Of course I'll be involved. The goal is to help people. The goal is to help people who might find themselves in a situation and give them an opportunity or a resource to get out of a certain situation, and ultimately prevent another tragedy like Ariana's from happening. I would say if you're afraid, if you're fearing when your spouse or significant other or partner is coming home, if there's alcohol involved and there's verbal abuse, and verbal abuse is often the beginning, right? So if you're being a victim of verbal abuse, it's time to get out. It starts with verbal usually. Now it could start with violence right out of the gate, but I will tell you that it gets worse, progressively gets worse. So we go through those phases that I mentioned earlier, and it could just be a yelling this time, it could be a slap next time, it could be a punch the time after, it could be several punches, it could be kicks, it could be a pillow over the face, it could be strangling. There's a lot of things that happened or could happen, and often these things escalate. If you can, leave. If you can't, you can call Cora. You can call the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office. You can call any police department, whether it's the city of Daly City or the city of Redwood City. It doesn't matter. You can call the police. You can leave your house. We can come to your house. You can go meet us at a coffee shop. You can come to the police department. There are a lot of things that you can do to help get advice. You can go to your church. Talk to a pastor, you can go to a counselor. Go to church is free, right? So you can go talk to anyone you want there. There are plenty of people who will help, and this isn't like this is sort of an isolated problem, right? Everybody knows about domestic violence. Every church you go to is going to be able to have a counselor available, at least a pastor or a priest or somebody, to be able to talk to you about this subject. And of course, every police department is going to make somebody available to talk to you, to help you out and give advice to whatever level we need to.